morning. Thank you so much, Shannon, for joining me here on the podcast, on the show. I'm so excited we got in contact with each other because I think a lot of couples are in a position they want to start off this year right, and they feel like, okay, how can I avoid financial disaster? I got a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of things I'm trying to keep track of, and they don't know which ones are the most important things.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to help.
So I think I know what a risk advisor is, but I'd love for you if you could just introduce what you've been doing and how you got into that.
Sure, happy to help. Since I've finished college, I've been helping people with their banking, their investments, their mortgages, and their insurance, and I've been doing that for over 15 years. And what I've learned in all that time is that everything really ties together. So no matter which of those areas we're discussing, what a lot of folks don't realize when I sit down with them, they don't realize that it all ties together and it's all at risk. So if they're not managing their daily risk, and it's everyday risks that each of us are facing, it doesn't matter your age, your ethnicity, your gender, your occupation, we're all facing what I call 7 of the biggest daily risks that can really lead to a financial disaster.
Yeah.
And a financial disaster can be one of a number of things. It could be, if you imagine, losing all of your savings, losing any home equity you may have built up if you're a homeowner, or even worse, losing your home, losing your income for 6 months or longer, or getting sued for $1 million. A lot of people I sit down with, they don't realize you don't have to be a millionaire to get sued like one. So those are a lot of the things that we usually talk about.
Wow. Well, I know this is definitely something on the minds of many. I've actually had this past week, some people email me, someone sent over Instagram, they had job losses, unfortunately. And so now they're scrambling to see, what fire to put out to kind of keep things moving until they can find employment again. So
Sure.
Definitely would love to talk to you about that. So you've had a lot of experience with this, over 15 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you've probably seen a lot of couples, and I understand every couple, there's unique circumstances that go into it, but you probably have seen some kind of patterns or maybe factors that lead to financial disasters. I was wondering, could you kind of go into what they are so maybe couples can kind of look out and see their finances and get a general idea of where they're standing?
Yeah, a lot of times the first thing we talk about is just them not knowing all of the risks they face. So I ask a lot of questions, get to know them pretty well, and find out a lot about their income, where it comes from. And no matter who I sit down with, generally income goes of one of 2 directions. It usually goes to support a family or to buy assets. And then we talk about their assets, their cars, their houses, any savings they're working on, any retirement accounts. And we talk about how to protect that. And a story I often tell, it's kind of like I remember seeing the movie Star Wars for the first time when I was a kid. And this is gonna age me a little bit. But the one scene, it was a successful movie. We were still seeing Star Wars movies, and it made such an impact on me that every time we walked through the toy store, I was always wanting to buy one of the Star Wars figures. And the part of the movie that really stood out was when there's a guy in the first one named General Tarkin, and he was in charge of Darth Vader, and they had built this, super death. It was the Death Star. It was the biggest weapon of mass destruction you can imagine. And they forced Princess Leia to watch as they blew up her home planet.
Yes.
And I remember seeing that movie, and I remember, frantically crawling onto my dad's lap, asking if that was real. And he had to point out that it was not. It was all done with models. And anyway, I asked if there was something that could blow up our world, and he said no. And unfortunately, now that I'm in my 40s, I have a wife and 2 kids of my own, and I realized that he wasn't exactly right, because a lot of people's world is their financial world, and there's not just one Death Star floating around out there. I call them disaster stars because it can lead to a financial disaster.
Yeah.
There's 7 of them, and they can attack all at once, or they can just attack one at a time. And if they do, if you haven't properly built a wall around your financial world for those things to bounce off, it can be terrible, and it can be heartbreaking. And I've seen a lot of folks negatively impacted, that it could have easily been prevented had just a little bit of planning been put in place. And to follow up on the planning, it doesn't take a lot of money to to build that wall. You might not build it all at once. It might take a little bit of time, but you can build it where if something comes up, like, you lose a job or you're injured and you can't work and generate an income, or, God forbid, someone dies sooner than expected and leaves behind a spouse and a mortgage and a family. It doesn't have to be a financial disaster, and just a little bit of planning with the right risk advisor can prevent all that.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on so many good points. A lot of us, we're trying to juggle it all. And like you said, it's all connected. So when you have a financial snag in one area, it almost snowballs if you're not prepared very quickly. And not a disaster, but exactly with kids, you never know what's going to happen, as they popped in and now they're back out.
They were great.
Yeah. They were quiet.
They were quiet and just waving.
Yeah. And we had that last year. One of the discussions we had was health insurance costs going up. And we found out that from my husband's job, it was going to actually go higher than our mortgage if we stayed with the same plan this year.
Right.
And so we decided to go with a high deductible insurance and kind of build up with health savings account. But our concern was those two little ones, as you saw, you never know what they're going to do. And it's like, is this something we're prepared for? Having those conversations. So I think that's great. Pointing out, look at scenarios that could come up, and talk with a professional like yourself to kind of run through those things. I think a lot of couples kind of wondering, how close are we with a financial disaster, or what kind of conversations should we have? From your perspective, which questions should they be asking?
I think a good question to start with is, if they do something that a lot of us do, if they drive a car, they should ask if they have the right liability limits. Unfortunately, nowadays, because of competition and every time you turn on the television or the radio, or you're looking on the internet and the little ads pop up, it seems to carry the same message from the insurance companies, which is, for a few minutes, I can save you money on your auto insurance. And that's not a good message, in my opinion, because we often try to save money, and it's not always the right thing to do if you're stepping over $1 to pick up a nickel. And if you have liability limits that are real low on your auto insurance and you cause the wrong accident, then you're at risk of being sued for $1 million or being sued for someone's injuries. I'll tell you a quick story. One of my friends who's a customer, he was visiting a coworker one weekend, and today we have blue skies. It's a pretty day. It was just like today. It wasn't raining. It wasn't dark. He was visiting this person on a nice day over the weekend, and he was leaving their neighborhood. He looks right, then he looks left. Everything looks good. And when he pulls out, a car zips around the corner and T-bones him, knocks him into the other lane of traffic. He hits a couple of other cars. Now, fortunately, he walked away with just a broken collarbone. But long story short, $600,000 later, the last medical bill was paid for the other people he had injured and was liable for. And so, luckily for him, we had recommended he have an umbrella policy in place. And an umbrella policy gave him an extra $1 million in liability protection on top of his auto policy. Thanks to that policy, there was no financial impact for him.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and otherwise, if he didn't plan properly, he would have spent a lot of money out of his savings, probably tapped into the equity in his home, tapped into his retirement account.
I couldn't even imagine. Yeah.
It can be awful. It could declare bankruptcy. And in most states, you can have your wages garnished. So you can end up working the majority of your career to pay off the wrong accident if you have low liability limits. So the first thing I would ask about is, what can you tell me about an umbrella policy, and what kind of liability limits do you recommend on my auto policy if you're a driver? Those are good places to start.
That's good. Oh my goodness. Yeah. $600,000. That wipes out everything for a lot of families.
Sure. Absolutely.
Definitely nowadays. Is there anything else a couple should be, they're just starting out, maybe they're, have a couple kids and they haven't even had these conversations yet. You mentioned insurance coverage, especially with cars. Any other areas of potential disasters that you've seen commonly cause huge problems with couples?
Yeah, I would start with this thing. Most people have a smartphone, and I think we take them for granted for certain. But one little trick I learned about mine probably 10 years ago now. my wife and I, we have a funny phrase for if, the worst happened and, I go sooner than I'm supposed to go. We'd call that getting hit by the beer truck. And it started out as, when she had our two kids in diapers and I'm trying to help one morning before getting out the door, she tells me, I often would say my life insurance is in place in case I get hit by the beer truck. And then she just, made an offhand comment. Well, you better hope I don't get hit by the beer truck because you don't know about any of this that's going on. And one thing we started doing was I sent her an email and I used my iPhone. I have that little notes app that always comes on my iPhone. And I created a note, and the note subject is if I get hit by the beer truck. And it basically tells her, these are where my life insurance policies are. This is where some of the other accounts are that you might not think of very frequently. I have my business loans here, so you would contact this banker, and I have this life insurance policy that pays off any loans associated with my business. And if you need to sell my business, this is an advisor I recommend you get in touch with. All of that I've put in the notes section, and I save it. And then I email it to her each year, the beginning of each year, and we call it my beer truck email. And it may sound goofy, but she's told me time and again that it makes her feel better knowing where everything is. Because sometimes I've had customers, something happens to them and a relative comes in and they ask, did he have a life insurance policy with you? And they don't know where everything is. And that's a big problem. So one thing I wanted this email from my wife to do is, I know that Susan knows where everything is. God forbid something should happen to me and she has to deal with everything. It's in that email every year. And then once the next year rolls around, I just go into the notes section and I update a few figures, balances, whatever that situation is. And then I send her the email again. And I know she likes it because she talks about it sometimes when we go out to dinner with people and she laughs about it. But she also says it makes her feel good and it gives her peace of mind. So I think that's a good starting point is if you're sitting down and you're a young couple, you're just starting your family, make sure you know what each other has. If you're both working, you both may have benefits through the workplace and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, but that little email, it takes a few minutes and I do it just once a year, but that updates both people, that updates, each person knows where the other person is and they know what kind of benefits are available if the worst were to happen.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. I know like some people like to keep a physical folder, but the smartphone is really handy too, because you can search for it.
Search for, we always have it with us,
Yeah. And, as you mentioned, like that's a difficult time. Should something happen, whether, hopefully they don't pass away, but even if they're unconscious, incapacitated, and you have to have that access, it gives you one less thing to worry about. That way you can focus on taking care of your loved ones. Well, Shannon, you're like a wealth of information.
Well, thank you.
Very helpful. And I know a lot of couples, this is something that's on their minds. I'd love for them to kind of get more information and talk to you. What's the best way for them to reach you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I have an easy quiz they can take online. If they go to avoidfinancialdisaster.com, there's a few questions they can answer. It'll send that email to me, and then I can make some suggestions. And if they're out of my area and need some advice and need to meet an advisor, I can make that introduction for them. And then a lot more about those 7 daily risks that I discuss. I wrote a book called How to Avoid Financial Disaster. And it's an ebook available on Amazon.com. So they can find it there by searching, or they can just plug in howtoavoidfinancialdisaster.com and it will send them to that page. And for your listeners, I have the price marked down to 99 cents.
Ooh,
so I promise you, you're not going to get a better deal than that, because I promise you there's way more valuable information in there than 99 cents worth.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shannon, for coming on the show. I definitely will be sharing this. Guys, if you haven't already, start having those conversations. Avoid financial disaster if possible. And if you're in it, work together to get out of it. And please get this deal with Shannon's book. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Elle. Have a great day.